Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Now, following on from the one shelf at a time, it suddenly dawned on me, what about one rack at a time? Now, I'm watering my mounts this morning, all of them, but I thought we've got 2 racks and 2 sides to each rack. That's the equivalent of 4 shelves, yeah? Now, okay, yes, the last one shelf at a time, the first one shelf at a time, hang on, let's get the mouth working properly. Needs coffee. Yeah, the first one was me watering a shelf, and this one just coincidentally will be me watering one side of a rack of the mounts. It's just coincidence. Under normal circumstances, I'll be filming a shelf without doing the watering, because it makes the video longer than it needs to be, basically. Anyway, we'll get on with this one. I shall have to fiddle with the camera, so I'll break off, set the camera up how I want it. Believe it or not, to get the camera up in that corner, I've had to get out my little desktop tripod. Now, that always used to be used for filming the kitchen time, because it was exactly the right height and everything for working on a worktop. But since I don't do that in the kitchen anymore, I've been using the tall tripod, the sort of full height one. But I got the little one out, so that's perched on the end of the workbench so that the rack, hopefully, and everything will be in view. It should work. Let's find out. Okay, so what I do when I'm watering the racks is I wheel them over so that they're close to where I'm going to water, less walking and all that sort of stuff. Plus, any drips are in an area where I can wipe it up easily, because it's in the middle, not all in amongst the bottom of the shelves and stuff. So that's the reason why I pull the racks over. So as I said, this is random. It's whatever is on that side of the rack. And they're only getting a flush today. I'll give you an update on the free water that comes out of Suck It Out Sam, the dehumidifier. It's not as pure as I was expecting. I'm getting a TDS reading sometimes as high as 100. Yeah? Which means, you know, when I'm adding the feed in, I'm getting a reading higher than I want. And the other thing is, with a TDS of 100, I don't actually know what's in it. Yeah? I mean, another time it might only be 35, in which case I'll ignore it. I mean, you have to bear in mind my RO water is 10 or 11. Anyway, I will be looking into that, and if it's going to consistently be that much higher, what I will do is mix it in with RO water, which means I'll still need some RO water, but this time of year a lot less. If I filled up the Vander bucket in one go and filled up my water bottles, and then as I used some RO water, started topping half of the container up with the water, it'll probably last me about 6 weeks. So we won't be doing so much of that. Right, let's get going with this rack. It's not a huge number of plants, but it is a variety. And there are also possibly some surprises. Now, this is Dendrobium tortilli. This is a winter resting type dendrobium. The 2 mature canes have obviously really finished growing, and there's no growth left in those. However, these 2 canes over here are still growing. They're still pushing out leaves. So, although this is a winter resting type, I can't rest it properly yet, simply because it hasn't finished growing this year's canes. This year's canes are not going to get to this size. These are the ones that will bloom next spring. So we've secured next year's blooms. It's the year after I'm worried about. These 2 canes this year started late. And quite honestly, they haven't produced much of a root system either. However, the older root system has branched out and grown a lot. So I do have roots. I'm not worried about the root system. So yeah, a winter rester that should be going into its rest now and can't because it's still growing. This is a pattern that matches quite a lot of my resting type or much drier in winter type dendrobiums, simply because everything started growing late this year. Reasons unknown. The logical reason is that they didn't get the heat in the spring that they would have got round the other place from the sun on the glass. They didn't get that here. So, you know, I may have to adjust things or just put up with the way it is. Now, as far as drips are concerned, I hang them back up again and they drip in the trays underneath, so I don't get too much water all over the place. Right, the next one, that's a little Orangus, and that's Orangus fastuosa. It has bloomed, it's grown several new leaves this year, and it's pushed out a couple of new roots. I'm beginning to realise that Orangus might not be the best plants to have in a collection. It specifically says in the dictionary, book on Orangus that I've got, written by a well-known orchid person and writer, and basically it says that quite a few of the species Orangus are short-lived, and that's in the wild. They just don't live long, so they're obviously very good at reproducing from seed and the seeds actually germinating. Otherwise they'd die out. And if they're very good at that, you know, they don't seem to live as long. But anyway, that one's hanging in there, that one's doing okay. Another dendrobium now, another winter rester. This is Primulinum variety Laos, so this is the one that has the yellow in the plants. Again, not much of a root system grown on this year, not much at all. But we have grown two nice canes. I thought I had a cat. Nope, probably kids. The school's not very far away. You sometimes get, you know, the screechers, the ones who have to be louder than everybody else, no matter how loud the whole playground is. Those sort, you know. Anyway, two nice new canes this year. They are coming to the end of their growth period, but there would still be a bit of swelling to do. So this one's still getting watered at the moment. However, if I was doing a feed run, it would only get a trickle. Because I don't really want to be putting fertiliser on the roots if the plant's not really going to utilise it. I mean, this plant's not growing much, it's just maturing its growths. It's just finishing off this year's growths. That's all it's doing. And then this is my other Orangus with the big long name, which I will do a pop-up for. This grows okay. It's a group of plants. It's not a single plant. It's a group. It's probably somebody did that out of a flask, like, and ended up with however many plants. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 plants on there basically. They seem to grow okay. They're an unusual looking, as well as an unusual name. That's an unusual looking Orangus, because to all intents and purposes, if you came across it and didn't know, you wouldn't think it was an Orangus, because the leaves are not anything like the others. Yeah, it grows okay. It's produced some new roots. The plants that are on there have extended okay, and we did get some blooms earlier in the year. So it's doing okay. It's a little bit of a nuisance because it's impossible to just water the roots. I end up getting the plant wet, which I'd rather not do at this time of year. But I always water quite early in the morning this time of year, so there's plenty of time for that to dry out as the day goes on. That's that one. This one is dead. So that's going out. It's a shame actually, because that should have been a good plant and it wasn't. It just didn't grow. And that happens. Now this is one of our project plants, the Mexicoa. And this one has almost finished growing. So what I'm doing with this is I'm trying to replicate its drier period, because where these grow, they do get a distinct dry period throughout the year, for a part of the year. So I'm replicating that by just doing a trickle around the edge of the mount. So I don't get any on the plant, and I just get some of the roots that are outside of the moss, the ones that are just on the mount, I get them wet. So there's not really much water goes on the moss. So it's just a trickle. because it's virtually finished growing for the year, which is the right time of year for it to have done that. You know, it would be going into its drier period now. So I'm trying to replicate that, but I don't want it to shrivel. Right, Dendrobium tetragonum. This is growing okay. It's pushed out some new roots. It's got a nice new growth here. Previous growth matured okay. It's doing all right. The previous one I had of this, I did have this before. It was the variety Giganteum, although it wasn't. Because when it actually bloomed, it wasn't what it should have been. Now I can't remember whether I actually gave that to somebody else, I think, or sold it, one or the other. Anyway, this one's coming along okay. It's distinguished from, because it looks very much like a Latoria type, but if you look at the cross section of the canes, they're square. Yeah, they've got flat sides. They're square. That's unusual. Anyway, that's doing okay. Another Dendrobium. This is not doing. Not quite sure whether this one's actually dying or whether it's just playing games. It's a black hair type. The leaves on this cane are falling, and the leaves on this cane are not looking as good as they should do. It does have a new growth coming. This is Igneonivium. Igneonivium. Read it for yourself. That's how I'm pronouncing it anyway. And it's a relatively new plant, and it could just be sulking. In other words, it's adapting. But given that it's a black hair type and we've got cooler temperatures, this just gets a trickle. That's not getting much at all. Because even on a mount, the roots can rot if they stay wet. So that's one. There's rather a high percentage of Dendrobiums on this shelf, but then a lot of my Dendrobiums are mounted, so that's going to happen. However, the other side of one of the racks, not this one in particular, there's only about 4 plants on the other side of this one. On the other rack, there's quite a variety on one side. Right, this is my Dendrobium harveyanum, that has the frilly blooms. And this one is pushing up some new growths near the base. Now that one looks like it's failed. Let's hope that one succeeds. It's matured a growth, it's had a spike on it, and at this time of year it wouldn't be doing much, but it is trying to push some new growth out, so it will need some water, and on a feeding run it will need some feed, but it's not getting much at the moment because those new growths are only just starting. So you can't say this is in vigorous growth, because it's not. So that's that one. And the last one on this row, so I do them a row at a time, that way I don't miss any, is a biggie. Now this was not mounted by me, I don't believe. It might have been, I can't remember now. But it's mounted in the Welsh moss, the very coarse moss. And it seems to like it because it has pushed roots right up through the moss, right up into the top corner. Now I mounted it upside down, that was these 2 canes. It then grew this one, well it was growing that one, it finished growing that one, and it desperately tried to turn upright, and now it's produced 2 new canes that are upright. So that's obviously how it would prefer to be. Nonetheless, it can still be on a mount. Yeah? Now this is... Has it got a tag? No, it hasn't. That's a shame because I can't remember what it is either. But it is in effect a Latoria type, and therefore it's not going to be growing much during the winter. These 2 canes have finished growing, but they're not properly mature yet. They will probably get a bit fatter and the leaves will darken. So although it's not growing vigorously, it would still be doing something inside the plant to finish maturing those canes off. So I'm not going to drown it because this moss is quite dense and holds an awful lot of water. So I just trickle some over it, and then that will gradually soak into the rest that didn't get any, and it will just become damp instead of soaking wet. Obviously when these two canes were growing vigorously back in the growing season, I'd have absolutely drowned that and the moss would be wringing wet. But this time of year, not so much. Right, logic here. We've got some dendrobiums round here that don't like bright light. Latoria types, the tetragonum. These are not bright light orchids, which is why they've got their back to the brightest light. The Mexicoa, I'm still not quite sure how that likes to grow, quite honestly. What I need to find out now is I've understood that they're often found in oak forests. Well, oaks are deciduous in Mexico, obviously, and so that's why the drier winter. You know, they do have a distinct dry period. But what I need to do is find out about light requirements. Are they a high light Oncidium type, or just a normal, you know, lower down in the trees? But if it comes from a deciduous forest, then during that dry period it would be quite bright, wouldn't it? So I think we might move that and put it in the other side of the rack where it's a lot brighter. I'll do that in a minute. Right, that's that row done. Next one. Next one is not in its normal place. I mean, not in the place it would normally be in my grow room, because it's a Masdevallia and it's on a mount. And it was a game, it was a little experiment. It's actually Masdevallia copper wing. And it would be wonderful if it could actually get up to a reasonable size and bloom. But although it's growing painfully slowly, and it's not getting to its full size. But nonetheless, it's produced some roots and it's produced quite a few new leaves this year that haven't fallen off. And obviously Masdevallias grow throughout the year, so that always gets watered. And this has had to put up with some pretty strong feed, because it's on a mount. If I'm feeding the mounts, then that gets fed. It gets whatever the other mounts get, and so far I haven't killed it. It's doing okay. I'm quite surprised. Right. We're nearly finished now for this rack. Next we've got my little mounted Phalaenopsis, and it's the only Phalaenopsis I've got that seems to put up with the lower temperatures in here. It seems as though it's almost acclimatised. I think it would do a lot better if it was warmer. Now this is one of these that extends the flower spike. The flower spike at the moment has finished. It will probably extend again, but it's already extended twice, so it's not doing it again, it's coming off. That gives the plant a rest, and under normal circumstances with an extending spike like that, if you remove it, it puts on a vegetative growth spurt. So it will probably, I mean it's growing a new leaf now anyway, there's a new leaf coming. It may produce that one at full size and another one, and possibly start branching some roots. The roots do branch every now and again, but the growing tips on the roots, apart from that one, have stopped. Oh no, that one's still growing as well. But it seems to do okay. I mean, there's virtually no moss left on that mount, so it's basically attached to the mount. It'll be lose quite a few roots to take it off. Let's put it that way. And all I do when I water this is make sure I pour water over every single aerial root until it changes colour, so that I know that the plant will be hydrated throughout the whole root system. And that's equally important if it was getting fed. Now it normally means going over all the roots twice. So you go over them once and they start to change colour, and then the second time they go dark, and then you know that they've absorbed water, and then the plant can get its hydration and nutrition from that. So we've given that a chop, taken the spike off, and as I said, the chances are it will now put on a growth spurt. We shall see. And then the last one on here is my Dracula Bella. It's not looking that good. So there's a few leaves that have just gone. It's on the older part of the plant, but the leaves on this are not happy. Whoop. whoops, it does grow new leaves. And there's a new leaf here, there's another one here, another one here. It is growing new growths. Now I've tried this in moss, I've tried it in various media, and I can't get it to take off. And this year it's produced no spikes at all. So I'm not quite sure. I bet if I take that out, the roots have gone. It's highly likely. But what I'm going to do with that today, now when I finish watering it, I'll water it first, is I'm going to spray that with the fungicide. See if I can stop these blemishes on the leaves. As you see, when the new leaves come out, they're relatively clean, but they do succumb to this spottiness. It'll be a fungal infection, so it can be stopped with a fungicide. But the other thing you have to be very careful of is the fragility of leaves. When you're applying a systemic fungicide and you're coating the whole plant, top and bottom of all the leaves, base of the plant, you're giving it a good go over like that. Sensitive leaves might actually just give up and say, no, I'm not having any of that, and they'll just fail. So you've got to go steady with that stuff. These are quite fleshy leaves, they're not flimsy. But anyway, I will get the systemic out in a bit and we'll give that a go. Right, so that's that one side of a rack. Same principle as the one shelf at a time, except for it's a rack. And as I said, I was watering this time. I won't be doing that every time. More coincidence than anything. And later today, on the 7th, I'm going to film everything in bloom on the 8th because I'm out tomorrow and I'll be making a relatively early start and probably be out most of the day. Which is, you know, I mean, my pots got watered yesterday and the day before. My mounts have been watered today, so there is no watering to do tomorrow. I've done the garden stuff today as well, so that'll do. We're probably going to get some rain later today. But looking at the weather forecast, tomorrow looks like the only guaranteed nice day, where it's going to be sunny most of the day along the south, which is where I am obviously. I'm off to a bonsai nursery, and a viewer, Gail, has decided that she will buy me a tree for my birthday towards the end of the month. And I thought, well, let's make a big deal of it sort of thing and actually go to a bonsai nursery. Hopefully I'll be allowed to film there. I don't see why not. And choose a tree from a bonsai nursery. And so we'll have a look at what I get when I get back, provided I find something I like. There is always that criteria. I could look round the whole nursery and just go, nah, not having any of them. It has been known before. Yeah, so that's where I'll be tomorrow. And with any luck, I'll try and arrange it, but it might not work. I'm hoping to call in at my son's place because the motorway that I use to get to where I've got to go, he lives not far off that motorway. It's only about a 3-mile detour. So I might call in and have a look at the new arrival. Not that that's of great interest to me, I'm afraid. Babies don't do anything for me. Doesn't matter whose it is. But I'm very interested in, he's converting a large van, like a horse transporter type van, into livable accommodation, you know, like a camper van type thing, with all the mod cons and everything, and solar paneling for power and everything. And he's put a lot of work and effort into that, so I'd like to have a look at that. And yeah, just pay a visit, you know. Try and show a little bit of interest in the new arrival. Yeah. I'll show a bit more interest when the little lad starts running around and talking gibberish. That's when I take a bit of interest, but not babies. I've no interest in babies at all. Anyway, we will see what happens, and yeah, another addition to the type of videos. Again, you could say, well, it's just another video watering, but it's different plants, and some of those plants you don't see. You know, because they don't come into bloom, or they've never bloomed or anything like that. So apart from when I got them and they were a new arrival, they don't get filmed. And that's the beauty that quite a few people have commented on, that by doing this theory, a shelf or a rack at a time, or a side of a rack at a time, you get to see plants that maybe that haven't been filmed for a year or more, or maybe even 2 years, or maybe they've only ever been filmed once when they first arrived. So it does achieve that. You do get to see, eventually, everything in the grown room will have been filmed. And by the time we get to that stage, we can come round and start again, perhaps. Because I don't plan on doing... Coincidentally, not only were these both watering ones, they were also consecutive days. I won't be doing that all the time. This is not the only videos you're going to get. But yeah, it would be nice to do the rounds and get through all the shelves and the racks, you know, over the coming weeks. Because the project orchids, they're not coming out again till November, you know, so we can fill up a reasonable amount of October going through this. And still keeping our eye out for new blooms and things like that. There's quite a few in spike, so there will be new blooms. And yeah, we'll see how we go. Plus we've got a show at the end of this month, so we'll see. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by. Oh, and thanks for all the congratulations and everything for the newborn. And those of you that commented on the picture of Hannah. A little bit of confusion by some people. Hannah is not the mum. Hannah was just holding the baby and it made a nice picture. But no, it's my eldest son's other half, Abby. It's her son. Well, and his, obviously. One would hope. See you next time. Bye for now.